Hey, thank you so much for checking out this video. As always, this is Sho, and as you already know, there's a large amount of 90s style JRPGs popping around on the Switch these days. I mean, you have the amazing AAA games such as Triangle Strategy, Octopath Traveler, and basically the entire Tokyo RPG Factory lineup, but there's also a really healthy amount of indie games. Obviously, we have Fairytale and games like that, but there are also other lesser-known games, such as Legrand Legacy. Now, for this video, we're going to explore one of those lesser-known games, and it's the first in a presumed series of classic JRPG-inspired games called Light Fairytale Episode 1. Originally dropped back in 2019 on Steam, Light Fairytale is the failed Kickstarter episodic JRPG of neko.works, a one-man team based in France. The game is marketed and consistent on its plan to, quote, bring back the immersion and emotions of 90s era JRPGs. Episode 1 is the start of this epic and introduces you to the two main characters, Haru and Kuroko, childhood friends who grew up and live in poverty in the underground slums. Now, the story, at least in this part, episode 1, opens with Haru's route with him dreaming of the sky and not really knowing what that is. He's woken by Kuroko, his BFF GF, who wants him to visit a crazy new shop on the second level of the slums. So, off you go to do stuff. And yes, honestly, it really is just like that, stuff. You're introduced to an evil empire who is more or less completely incompetent, but somehow wins by being intimidating, I suppose? I mean, it's really hard to tell because throughout this entire episode, you barely see them, and you only directly battle with them 3 times, and one of them is the final boss of this prologue experience. Now, in a twist for these videos, I'm going to outline the entire 2-hour experience with this game from start to finish. And yes, the whole of a single route, in this case Haru's route, takes around 2 to maybe 3 hours to fully complete. So, here we go. Go to shop, go to work, go play hide and seek, go get sad, go join Pina for a single situation, go running a lot, go get an odd job, go fight discount guard scorpion, go jump off a cliff, the end. And yeah, being honest, there's little to no in between there. No farming, no grinding, very little extra things to do, very little extra dialogue aside from those points. The game does offer 3 to 4 mini-games, and you play the exact same things from Kuroko's perspective after you finish Haru's route, which is really not much different. It's the same game, just with a few minor changes to the dialogue. Now, I understand that writing and game development is a massive challenge, and heaven knows I've tried it myself, and honestly, it can be hard to get out concepts and prevent the story that you envision. Even making these videos, sometimes I find myself struggling to say what I really want to say. But for this game, especially when your drive and your main concept is to revisit 90s area immersion and emotion, this game completely misses the point. This game clearly takes much inspiration from Final Fantasy VII with the slums underground theme, a blonde-haired anime clueless trope of a protag with a black-haired brawler love interest. I can see it. And it's that regard, I mean, it visually looks amazing. Regardless of your opinions with the chibi aesthetic, the set pieces are extremely well designed and presented in a very nice way. It definitely calls back that Final Fantasy VII experience from the late 90s. The audio, while not 100% of my jams, is effective and does echo that 90s feel. Though I do admit the somewhat cheapo Japanese end battle quotes are a little bit too much for me. Naturally, all the promo artwork and the anime openings are beautiful. But once you break down that facade, the game is just shallow. It lacks the subtle complexity that many of the JRPGs of the 90s had, and the stories and the characters that they presented. Let's take Haru. Haru is a one-dimensional anime trope that after 2 hours of gameplay decides on joining the rebels, and yes, they're just called the rebels, because they took a minor character captive and imply that bad things may happen. A reasonable assumption, but up until that point, the Empire was just presented as a bunch of lazy guards who don't fight, they get scared when one single mean general comes walking around, they're sleeping. So how can I see their strength or power? If we compare this to Final Fantasy VII concepts, 2 hours in, Cloud doesn't take Avalanche all that seriously, but we see Shinra's strength through our journey in the reactor, the way that they police and mark the local populations above the plate and below the plum plate in the slums. And honestly, Kuroko, for that fact, doesn't really fare much better. She's explicitly painted as a love interest with literally one character telling her, "Did you confess yet?" Naturally, Haru misses that, by the way, but her whole character is essentially, "I love Haru, therefore I would do anything and go wherever Haru is." Very little in terms of character development or even just character. She has a tech background that is showcased in a single scene with a battle skill that she has involving hacking, but there's nothing past that. There's no extra scenes on how she got so good with electronics. There's very little that's offered in there, and what's presented in Kuroko's side is not much to help that. Looking at Tifa, 2 hours in, she's quite complex. Her and Cloud have a history, but it's not really too clear. Does Tifa really care about Cloud? Cloud recalls his promise in past, but Tifa doesn't really say much to that. It seems like she cares about him, but then again, there's some distance. Why aren't they as close as they should be? Why is what's being presented feel off? And that adds to the mystery of their history, which becomes, as we know, elucidated further on. Now, I've likely already gone on too far, but what makes those 90s stories and characters so memorable is how their emotions are nuanced. This nuance then plays directly into their actions and motivations. Haru's last-minute realization of, "They're after me, so if I distract them, then Kuroko can run," doesn't carry much weight because there's very little chemistry or development between them. We just know them as childhood friends, but it seems like it's a one-sided love. When we look at Cloud joins Avalanche as a combination of what we learn about his past experiences with Shinra, and not so much because Tifa says pretty please, even though that we can argue there might be a little bit more with his nuanced personality. Then, when Haru actually jumps off the cliff as his plan, which again was never presented when he comes up with this in the scene before, it just seems like we want to recreate the fall scene post-Airbuster, which again is a super nuanced situation from 7. Specifically with Cloud's choice of words added to his character. He didn't choose to fall off. He chooses to give in to his weakness, or to express the care that he's starting to show his friends and his loved ones. Anyway, additionally, I guess for this game, to pad out the time and to try to hit that dopamine rush, the game offers a massive collectibles encyclopedia that literally tells you every possible event or thing you can do. The downside? There's no tooltips or any supplemental information that makes it really worth it. It just says what you can do, but offers nothing helpful or resourceful for doing everything. It only confuses me as when I look back on the gaps of my missed entries, I get confused on what other possible choices I have, considering I already exhausted all possible options at that time. So I guess the last point is just performance, and yeah, it plays well, so just don't worry about that. As for my general thoughts, again, it's visually and auditorily beautiful, but lacks core substance, a concept that's going to spin into this next section. Light Fairytale is built as a typical JRPG, with characters traversing map zones and interacting with the world. In an attempt to alter the formula, the addition of AR goggles allow you to see certain elements in the world, but this is basically just a flag on characters to see if you can talk to them. Note that once you talk to them for the first time, you actually can't re-talk to them, so they can't do it unless if they have new dialogue. It also shows you the zone names to help with navigation, but this game only has 22 maps. That includes very simple one-piece junctions, so you'll be able to navigate extremely well alone. The goggles can also be used in battles to show the stats and health of your enemies, but that's it. Speaking of battles, they're the typical turn-based affair, but honestly they're overly cluttered. Haru and Kuroko can equip 2 weapons each, however there are only 4 weapons in the whole game, and you start with 3 of them, so yeah. Anyway, you can select whichever weapon you want to use. I suppose that the weapons are meant to have certain effects based on the enemy, but I never noticed the difference between Kuroko's gloves and boots during fights. You also have commands based on your character, and equipped materia, orbs. However, there are no tooltips in the menus during battle, so you have no idea what skills do. In fact, come to think of it, there's no actual in-game skill checker, so Well, the gist is that Haru has a protect skill that he can defend Kuroko, or Maybe taunt the enemy? Honestly, I don't know because I can't get it working properly. I don't even know what it does when I use it. Kuroko has a hacking skill that can lock and machine enemies' action skill, but there's only one machine enemy in the whole game that it works on, so kudos. Now, I mentioned orbs before, and if you caught my joke, it's basically materia. Each weapon and armor has an orb slot amount. Equipping orbs allows you to gain magic attacks, add a magic buff to your weapon, though do note that if you add a magic buff to your weapon, it uses MP per attack. And you can also add resistances to your armor. Unfortunately, there are only 3 that I found, maybe 4 orbs in this game. You get lightning, which is of course lightning magic, all, which is the target all materia, and credits up, which you get from a minigame that's actually kind of helpful. Do note that pressing R allows you to cycle the elemental orb on your weapon during battle, so if you're looking to conserve MP, you need to make sure that the orb isn't active. Finally, there's a limit break system called Fury. Just keep getting slapped and eventually your hair will turn white and you'll use a powerful move. Haru heals, Kuroko does beat rush, quintuple combo. Otherwise, you get the usual items and that's it. In battle, your command is, just select your command and let it rip. It's an extremely simple system that adds nothing that other JRPGs haven't done already, and arguably haven't done better. So for those of you new into these games, no worries, it's easy to pick up, just a bit cluttered. For veterans, you already know it. Just get ready for the interesting approach that the battles take. All battles in Light Fairytale are pseudo-scripted. You have an unavoidable battles that you must do, like bosses and such, but there are no random encounters. Using the AR goggles, you'll notice a certain circular zones with a percentage in it. These are battle zones, and once that percentage reaches 0, that's it. No more battles there. So, no grinding, which I guess is very unique for a JRPG. With that said, that makes the overall difficulty of the game extremely easy. In fact, I was able to breeze through most battles, and I didn't spend any money on any recovery items. The enemies also have a limited number of skills, and basically for every single boss, you're told exactly how you need to approach them in battle, so there you go. Easy. Now, there is a hard battle setting that you can activate in the main menu only, and this honestly doesn't do much. All it did was slightly increase the damage output of the enemies, and make some bosses hit a bit harder, so I needed to use some healing items. Otherwise, no real difficulty increases. So, in terms of the AI and difficulty of Light Fairytale, it's simple. For newcomers, an easy approach, but keep in mind that there are no official tutorials or tooltips in the in-game menus, so you can either just watch my tac section to know how to play the game, or just fiddle around and figure it out yourself. For veterans, there's not much there even on hard mode. There's some really good potential concepts for battles, but just nothing that really sticks out. Again, it's just a shell. So, the game has a lot of mini-games. I think I said like 3 or 4, right? The big cheese actually involves one of them. There's a mini-game that involves you sneaking around to try to dodge guards as you're moving around this area. The idea is that the faster you move from one side to the other, the more points you get. But this isn't the case. In fact, you actually could just keep bouncing back and forth between 2 sections, getting the minimum amount of points to get the minimum 100 you need for that credits up orb. So, yeah. Don't even worry about that. On that note, regarding the battles, just do like the first battle you need to. If you can try to dodge an entire area altogether, I would advise dodging it. If you're stuck into one battle, just do that one battle. Save the rest of your battles till after you get that credits up orb. This way you can maximize the number of credits you get on your playthrough, which you can use to buy extra healing items if you need them, or you can help, I guess, prepare for episode 2 if that ever gets the Switch release. Finally, and this is, I guess, probably important to mention, the all orb is dropped after a certain boss, but what you need to do is you have to beat the boss, and then you need to leave the room, and then you have to come back into the room to see it on the floor. This actually helps with the final boss of this episode 1 prologue thing, as it's weak to lightning, and it has multiple parts. So by popping it on Kuroko, she can cast lightning on the multiple parts, and it just drops the boss much quicker. It would be no surprise, at least by now, to state that I really cannot recommend this game. Despite its beautiful presentation and the depth and care of its visuals and audio, The game itself completely misses the point of 90s era JRPGs in its story execution and its gameplay elements. Its low price point is definitely an appeal, but considering you only get 2 to 3 hours of play per route, and there's minimal to no variation in between, you're basically paying premium for a prologue or a demo for that matter. This then, I guess, begs the question, Sho, why did you take your time making a video on a game with minimal coverage that you don't like? Well, first, I wanted to express my opinions against a sea of reviews that give a large amount of what I consider, at least, to be backhanded praise to the game. On Steam, the reviews for Episode 1 are very positive. However, when actually reading most of them, the common concept of it's nice but not worth the money, comes up a lot. And for me, that defeats the purpose of the 90s era. If you cannot say a game is worth the money spent, can we really be that positive with it? And additionally, this review is, I guess, more or less for the developer. Now, I know that on the sea of YouTube, that a channel such as mine and a video like this will likely never make it to the eyes and ears of neko.works. However, if in the chance that this video somehow does, I just want to say that this video is not a personal attack. Rather, it's my hope that the developer can consider what is presented here and work towards considering what happens in future installments of this series. I feel like there's a lot of potential. Now, I say this with love from one 90s era JRPG to another. I know that the second episode is already out on Steam, so perhaps maybe more change can come from episode 3 onwards. Well, if you made it here, thank you so much for your time and the view. Please let me know in the comments below your experiences with different 90s era JRPGs or games that take inspiration from such. Perhaps maybe even a recommendation for a future video would be nice too. Otherwise, if you want to send your love and support the channel, subscribing would be amazing. So thank you so much for sending your love. Now, YouTube right now will likely be showing another video on my channel that might be good for you, so feel free to check it out. Otherwise, this is Sho, and next time we're going to be looking at Eiyuden Chronicle Rising. Catch you next time. Cheers!